Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. I'm going to start this next topic, which is titled Practicing in a World of the Unknowing, Relationships with Non-Practitioners. This is going to help you in situations where you're learning and practicing the wisdom of the Buddha and going out into the world and you're becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful, but you're around people who aren't practicing the teachings. And maybe they're disgruntled, they're irritated, maybe they're headed for danger and difficulties. And you can see that very clearly. Maybe they're even blaming you for the things that they're experiencing. And this can oftentimes be a real struggle for you, where you're becoming more and more peaceful and maybe your parents are still disgruntled or agitated or annoyed and having all kinds of difficulties. So I'm going to explain this to you and give you some guidance that you can practice here in situations where you're around people who aren't actually practicing the teachings. And just like always, you guys are always welcome to ask any and all questions. Just like before, you guys are welcome to use the microphones here, and anyone online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. First, let's just talk about what a non-practitioner is to help you guys understand what I'm talking about here. What a non-practitioner is someone who's not actively learning and practicing the path to enlightenment as taught by the Buddha. The Buddha refers to this person as an untrained worldling. If you read his teachings, he talks about this because an individual is holding on to the world really tightly and they're untrained. So he refers to them as an untrained worldling. So I refer to them as non-practitioners. So whenever you're talking about this particular topic or you're thinking about this topic, it's important that you don't take the attitude of an us versus them. Sometimes this can be the way the mind thinks, is like, oh, we're practicing the teachings and they're not, so we're better than them or something like that. It's really unwise to do that, to take a us versus them mentality. But it's just that when you have certain wisdom that other people don't have, you're going to see people functioning in the world very differently. So if you're learning the Four Noble Truths and you know that you cause your own anger and you cause your own frustration and agitation and annoyance and all these other discontent feelings, but the people around you, they don't know that, and they're blaming you for what they're experiencing. So it's just a difference of wisdom, a difference of understanding of the world. That's really all it is. And it's not that we're better than them or they're worse than us or anything like that. It's just that we're working from and operating from almost like two different sheets of music. If we were playing a musical instrument, they're playing one sheet of music and we're playing another sheet of music, and the music doesn't really blend sometimes and it doesn't sound so beautiful. So what I'm going to teach you is how to get to a point where you can be peaceful and joyful even though this other person's maybe playing some different music. So it's not that they're bad or they're wrong or anything like that. That's not what we're doing here. We're not taking a us versus them mentality, but we're just recognizing that they have different thoughts and different ideas and different wisdom than what it is that you're learning on the path to enlightenment. So a non-practitioner is going to think about the world in a very different way. They're not going to necessarily understand the Four Noble Truths. They're not going to understand that their mind is causing their own discontentedness. They're not going to understand the Eightfold Path. They're not going to understand that craving, desire, attachment within their own mind is part of their struggle, and that's why they're struggling. Oftentimes people are going to blame you for the things that they're experiencing in life, and you might really struggle with that if you don't understand what I'm going to teach you here. They'll most likely have what we refer to as wrong view. What wrong view is where you blame other people for the feelings that you experience. What right view is to understand the Four Noble Truths, that everyone who's unenlightened will experience discontentedness. The cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. The mind is craving permanence. That the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And the path leading to the complete elimination of discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. When you learn this thoroughly and you independently verify it and you practice it, you can establish right view, where you're never blaming other people for the feelings that you experience. As soon as you blame somebody else or look for someone else to blame about anything in your life, that's wrong view. So if someone has wrong view, they're going to be blaming you and they're going to be blaming other people for the things that they experience. And more, what you would like to get to is get to right view, where you're not blaming other people and you can see very clearly that everything you experience in life is a result of your decisions. Sometimes we call it good luck or bad luck, or we call it destiny or fate, or we might blame what we experience on other people. But as long as you keep doing that, you're never going to be able to cultivate the wisdom that you need to make wiser decisions and experience different results in your life. So if the mind is stuck in wrong view, you're just going to stay stuck in this discontentedness over and over, where you keep experiencing anger and sadness over and over and over again. But the more you can establish right view, where you clearly see that what you experience in life is a result of your decisions, now you can actually cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results. If there's anything that you don't particularly care for in your life that is happening, and you would prefer for that thing to not happen, all you need to do is look at the decisions that you're making that are leading to the result that you're experiencing. Just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if we blame others for the things that we experience, then you're never allowing the mind to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results. So when you cultivate wisdom, you'll be able to make different decisions and experience different results. But if we have wrong view, you're not able to do that, because everything that you're experiencing is because of somebody else. So that means you can't control anything that you're experiencing in life. And this is very defeating in your life. That if you can maintain responsibility for your own intentions, your speech, your actions, all the things that are happening in your life, all your emotions, if you can maintain responsibility for your own life, now it's just a matter of cultivating wisdom, making different decisions, and you will experience different results. So if there's anything you don't particularly care for in your life, just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. So this is what you might be learning on the path to enlightenment, but non-practitioners, they're not going to be learning that. They're going to have wrong view. They might be blaming you and all the people around them for the things that they're experiencing. And this can be a real challenge for you, especially when you know the truth. When you know with 100% certainty, you are not causing that person to be annoyed. You are not causing that person to be angry. It's their own craving. But yet they're blaming you for this. You can really struggle during these periods of time. So this can be a real challenge for you, because they're blaming you for their discontentedness. They most likely, as a non-practitioner, won't understand true love. Like many of you don't even understand true love right now at this point. Even though I just explained it in the previous talk, the ability to learn something, to reflect on it and practice it and cultivate wisdom, it takes many weeks, it takes many years sometimes to be able to fully cultivate your wisdom around any particular topic. So you being on the path to enlightenment and kind of just getting started, you don't 100% know what true love is and know how to practice true love yet. So these non-practitioners who aren't even listening to these kinds of talks, they don't necessarily know what true love is. So people around you that are non-practitioners, they might be putting their expectations on you. They might be trying to control you. They might be trying to force you to do things their way, because their mind thinks the way that they get to happiness is to get you to do things their way. That's their cravings. That's their wants. That's their expectations. That person might get happy if you work really hard and get to the point where you're doing things their way, but that happiness is temporary. Their happiness is going to fade away, because eventually they're going to have more expectations of you, and then you're going to work really hard to get to that. And then they'll be happy for a period of time, but then they won't be happy anymore. They're going to want more from you, and their expectations are just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So that person will never get to permanent happiness through you. You aren't the one that's causing their happiness. So you can't help them to get happy permanently. They have to get rid of their expectations. They have to get rid of their cravings, because if they want you to be a certain way, you're not going to be that way permanently. So if they're forming their happiness based on their expectation of you, that means they can only be happy when you do things the way that they expect. And this is their mind trying to get their cravings fulfilled. So since non-practitioners don't understand true love, they could be putting expectations on you. You might have your parents or your life partner or your other people in your life, your family and friends, trying to put expectations on you. And they firmly believe that if you just do things their way, they will be happy. And they just don't understand that they're stuck because it's their cravings and expectations. They're longing, yearning for you to be a certain way. And you are a separate person than them. They living their life, you're living your life. You can't meet other people's expectations permanently. It's not possible. The problem that they're experiencing is their discontentedness. The cause of their problem is their craving, their desire, their attachment. It's not you. But they don't understand that. So they might be putting their expectations on you and trying to control you because they don't understand true love. Also, they may not be cultivating wholesome qualities in their mind, and they might not be working to eliminate unwholesome qualities in the mind. People who are off the path to enlightenment, who are blaming other people, typically they don't realize that they're actually the source of their own problems. Oftentimes, not only do they have this lack of wisdom in their mind, thinking that other people are causing them to be angry, but they also have ego. And so does an unenlightened being. You guys might have ego in your mind where the mind thinks that I'm so perfect and everybody else is wrong. So you might be around parents or brothers or sisters or others who thinks that everything that they do is right and everything that everyone else does is wrong. And now, because they're having their ego in their mind, they think that they're so great and they're doing everything so wonderful. They're not choosing to cultivate wholesome qualities in their mind, and they're not working to eliminate unwholesome qualities out of their mind. So if you're on this path, you might be working to cultivate wholesome qualities and eliminate unwholesome qualities. That's what the Buddha is guiding you to do. But other people in your life might not be doing that. And now you're interacting with maybe a life partner or your children or your parents or other people, brothers and sisters, who you're working on becoming a better and better person, but they're not. And this can be a real struggle for people in their life. So this is what a non-practitioner is experiencing. So let me back up for a second. Do you guys have any questions on what a non-practitioner is? Have I made this clear for you guys? You understand, like someone who's not practicing the teachings, they have a different wisdom than someone who's on the path to enlightenment. So they're operating from a different sheet of music than you are. And this is what's making it sound and seem like, wow, things are so difficult. So as you're becoming more and more wise in these teachings, they're not. And now you're going to see all these challenges because of that. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any questions here either. Okay. So now these are some of the challenges that one experiences when you're interacting with non-practitioners. By you knowing the teachings and observing non-practitioners struggling, but yet they're uninterested to learn and practice the path to enlightenment. So you can know the path to enlightenment and you can know the struggles and difficulties that your family and friends are encountering, and you know the solution. You have the wisdom to help them, but they're not interested. This can be a real challenge for you in these situations because you know that you could make these decisions and you could provide them this wisdom that would make their life so much better and so much easier, but they're just not interested. And what you need to do in these kinds of situations is you need to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment to helping people. The craving, desire, attachment is the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. That's not going to feel comfortable for you because as you're longing, yearning, and chasing and putting expectations on people, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful. You can only be peaceful if people do things your way. But if you're all the way over here on the other side where you could care less about what happens to people, you're not going to feel peaceful and joyful there either. So that's not what I'm suggesting for you to practice. What you need to practice is the middle way, where you have this concern for the misfortune of others, where you're interested in helping others, but you realize that each person is responsible for their own life. They're responsible for their own emotions. They're responsible for their own happiness. You can't rush in and make a bunch of decisions for people and change their life and change what they experience. They have to choose to do that for themselves. So it's helpful to stay open to helping people and you're willing to help people, but you're only going to be able to help people when they're open to your help. If you tried to rush in an unsolicited way and tried to force and control people to do things your way, this is your own mind's craving, desire, attachment. So if you have a longing and a yearning and a wanting to help people, a longing, yearning for it, then not everybody's going to want your help, and you're going to feel discontent when they don't receive your help. But again, if you're over here and you never tried to help people, you're not going to feel comfortable there either. So you got to find this middle way where you can selectively help people who are open to your interest, open to your guidance, open to your suggestions, open to your advice, right? In some cases, people are going to be open to your advice. In other situations, they're not, right? So I'll give you an example of this. Me and my mom, as you guys heard earlier, had a lot of problems when I was growing up. There was a lot of resentment that I had towards her. And I saw her heading for all kinds of problems in life. And there were times where I really wanted to help her. And I wanted to step into her life and tell her what she should or shouldn't be doing. But I chose not to do those kinds of things. But over time, as she would ask me advice, I would give her advice and I would try to help her. And oftentimes she didn't do what I suggested to her. She would listen to me. She would understand what I was saying, but then she would go off and do things completely different in a different way. And it would have all kinds of problems for her. So my mom would sometimes come to me. This one situation, she came to me and she told me all the different problems she was having with this one particular situation. And she asked for my advice. I spent about 45 minutes or an hour on the phone teaching her what would be wise and unwise for her to do. And she was asking me questions and she was interested and listening and all these kinds of things. And we got to the end of the conversation and she said, David, I think what you said is 100% correct and accurate. And it would be helpful if I did it that way, but I'm not going to do it that way. And I said, okay, Mom, it's up to you. She said, okay, thank you for your time. We'll talk another time. And I was like, all right, bye-bye. And she went away and she did whatever she did. And she came back like 6 months later and she said, David, it happened again. And I said, what? She said, I didn't do what you said and it turned out really bad. And I said, that's okay, Mom. It's okay. Right? So you're going to be in a situation where even people are open to your advice and asking for your help, and you share that with them, and you take all this time to do it, and they still do things differently and opposite of you. So if you're truly interested in helping someone, and you're doing it without craving, desire, attachment, you can maintain your peacefulness whether they do what you suggest or not. If you have a craving to help people, if you're longing, yearning, and you're wanting to help people, you can only be happy if they do things your way or they accept your help, right? So you would like to get away from this craving, this longing, yearning, and be willing to help people, but understand that they have to make their decisions themselves, that even you spend an hour talking to somebody, they might go out and do things completely opposite of you, of what you suggest. And if you're practicing pure generosity, where you're giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return, you should be able to maintain your peacefulness and your joy there. So when I was sharing with my mom for a 1-hour conversation, I didn't have any expectation that she was going to do what I suggested, right? Because I was just sharing. I was just giving and sharing without any expectation of anything, even that she would follow what I say, right? So if you're practicing pure generosity, it protects your mind, because even if someone goes off and does something opposite of what you suggest, your mind's protected because you don't have a craving, desire, attachment to help this person. You're willing to help this person, but you're not craving it. You're not longing, yearning for it. Okay? So you're going to need to eliminate that and allow everyone to approach these teachings on their own terms, right? Everybody has to decide for themselves if they would like to learn these teachings or not. Nobody has forced you to be here today. Nobody has forced you to watch online, right? This is your own free will decision. You can't force somebody to learn these teachings. It just doesn't work that way. There's about 1,000,001 decisions that someone has to make in order to get to enlightenment, and they're going to need to make those decisions by themselves. So you shouldn't be out there thinking that, the idea is to convince other people to learn and practice these teachings. Each person has to choose for themselves that they would like to learn meditation, that they would like to come to the temple, that they would like to read books, that they would like to consult with the teacher. Each person has to decide these things for themselves. Non-practitioners are going to have a certain amount of unwholesome moral conduct in terms of speech and actions. So if you are around your parents and maybe they drink alcohol or use drugs, maybe they're very harsh and bitter and hostile, or maybe you have friends or family members that are making unwise decisions around the way that they speak or the way that they act, this can be really challenging for you because you know it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol, or you know it's unwise to be harsh and bitter and hostile with people, and it's better to be loving and kind. You're going to know this if you learn this path to enlightenment. You're going to see all the problems that harshness and bitterness and hostility brings about. You'll see all the problems that alcohol and drugs brings about in one's life. And when you see your people that are close to you, that are non-practitioners, that are doing these things, you might really struggle in those situations. So you're going to need to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment to wanting people to do things a certain way. You're going to have to eliminate that and realize that they are their own being, making their own decisions. You're going to need to learn how to respond to situations rather than react. Because when you have a craving in your mind and something is happening, you might react to it. And usually when you react, you're reacting out of your own cravings, your own anger, and your own lack of wisdom. And as long as you're functioning out of reacting to things, it's going to blow up in your face. It's going to blow up on you. So what you would like to do is step back from situations, think about it, and then consult with a teacher if you need to, but essentially use your wisdom to then respond to a situation. And in some situations, the response that you might make is to choose to just walk away. That can be a response, right? If you're like on the phone when I was on the phone with my mom sometimes, she would be bitter and harsh and hostile. Her moral conduct wasn't very wise. I would just get off the phone. I would say, Mom, I love you. I'm sorry. I've done this to you in the past. I've been bitter and harsh and hostile to you, but I'm choosing not to do that anymore. And I prioritize our relationship, and I'm really interested in seeing us have a better relationship. So even though in the past I've been bitter, harsh, and hostile, I'm going to get off the phone and let you think about what it is that you just said. And then I said, I love you, Mom. Bye-bye. Right, we'll talk another time. Right, where in the past I would have been angry and bitter and harsh because I was reacting out of my own craving, anger, and lack of wisdom. But then I started responding in this situation. And now I was responding through generosity, through loving kindness, and through wisdom. And that's what produced the wholesome results and transformed our relationship. So it's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly angry and hostile and bitter. You'll go through a period of time where in the past, when somebody would do something and it would trigger one of your cravings, you would be maybe angry and bitter and harsh and hostile. But now when you start realizing it's your own mind is causing this, somebody will do something that will trigger your craving and you'll be quietly frustrated. And that's better than where you were before. Because if your intention, speech, and actions are bitter and harsh and hostile, you're putting out this harm through your intention, speech, and actions, and all that's going to come back to you in your relationships. So it's better to just be quietly frustrated and bite your tongue than to say something that's going to be bitter and harsh and hostile. Because when you put that out, it's just going to come back to you, right? So you might be in situations where you just need to bite your tongue and walk away. This isn't the teaching of the Buddha, but this is teaching of grandmother. Grandma used to say, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all, right? And that's sometimes the best advice. If you're in a conversation and someone's arguing and being bitter and harsh and hostile, if you don't have something good to say, just don't say anything at all. Just stay quiet, right? And if that means you need to walk away, and as you walk away, the person gets angrier and angrier and angrier, you're not causing that anger. Their mind's causing it. It's their craving. Just keep walking away and remind yourself you're making a good decision because they're getting so angry. It's not the proper time to talk. It's unwise to talk in that situation. So as you're walking away from these relationships and maybe you're walking away from a conversation, it's wise to be able to use the evidence of them getting angry and hostile and bitter as your verification that, yes, I'm making a wise decision here, because they're so attached. They're having so much craving and so much desire that just me walking away, they get more enraged. So use that as evidence for you that yes, you're making a wise decision by walking away, that you're choosing to respond to this situation. And your response can be that you're walking away rather than reacting with bitterness and harshness and hostility. You might actually choose to move on from relationships while maintaining your loving kindness and compassion for all beings, understanding that any discontentedness that you are experiencing is coming from your own cravings, desires, attachments. So what you guys have heard me talk about is that when your cravings are being triggered and you get angry, with a lack of wisdom, you'll push people away. This is called aversion, okay? But there is the ability to walk away from a relationship while maintaining what we call right view. So from the outside looking in, it's going to look the same. You're walking away from a relationship. But the difference is what's going on in your mind. If you're in a relationship and you're getting angry and frustrated and agitated, and you push this person away and you choose to leave out of the relationship thinking that they are the problem, and now you've pushed them away and you're leaving out of the relationship because you think they're the problem and you just solved your problem, this is aversion. And this is having wrong view because the mind thinks that this person is the problem. But you can also be in certain relationships where there's hostility and bitterness in this relationship, and you realize that you're not committed to the relationship and you're not really able to sort this relationship out, and it's better for you to move on from the relationship. And you might decide to just gradually move away from the relationship. But all the while, you know that any discontent feelings that you're experiencing is coming from your own mind, that it's your own cravings, desires, attachments. And you need to work on that. By you leaving the relationship, it doesn't solve your cravings, desires, attachments. It doesn't solve your anger and your bitterness and hostility. It doesn't solve that by leaving the relationship. But what it can do is it can help you let go of this attachment. It can help you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment in this relationship so that now when you move on, you can be working on training your mind. So in this situation, it looks exactly the same. You're walking away from a relationship. But in the first scenario, the mind thinks that the problem is the other person and that you've solved your problem by walking away from the relationship. In the second scenario, you realize that the problem is within your own mind. It's your craving, desire, attachment that's causing these discontent feelings, and that you might need to leave the relationship in order to work on that craving and get rid of that attachment so that you can get to the peace and the joy. Do you guys see the difference between these two scenarios? Yeah. Okay. So if you need to do the second one, that can be a wise choice, right? And in these situations where you're moving on from a relationship, you don't need to go to the person and tell them, hey, I can't be your friend anymore, and here's all the reasons why, right? This is what we typically do when we have a lack of wisdom and we're ending a relationship. We feel like we have to leave on a high note. We have to preserve our ego and show them that we are right and they're wrong. Here's all the reasons why I can't be your friend anymore. What you're doing is you're listing out all your cravings, desires, attachments. You're listing out all your expectations. I expected you to do this and you didn't do it. I expected you to do this and you didn't do it. I expected you to do this and this and this and this and you didn't do it. And that's why I can't be your friend anymore. This is all your cravings, desires, attachments. And if you go and have this conversation with them, there's going to be this conflict, and now there's going to be all these problems that are going to occur as a result. And now when you see them 2 or 3 years later in the mall or something like that, there's going to be this bitterness and hostility between you guys. So it doesn't make sense to go to somebody and say, I can't be your friend anymore because of all of these reasons. Instead, if you're in a relationship right now that you need to move on from, just gradually move on. If you guys send text messages to each other every day or every 2 or 3 days, just gradually expand that. Make that 5, 6, 8, 10 days, and then just gradually move on. It allows your mind to gradually let go and move on, and it allows their mind to gradually move on and let go, right? And now when you see each other 2 or 3 years later in the mall, it's like, hey, Barbara, I haven't seen you in a while. How you been doing? Right? Because you've been working on your mind, and maybe they've been working on their mind too. And now 2 or 3 years later, it's like, hey, Barbara, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. I haven't talked to you in a while. How's it going? Right? You can chat again. Whereas if you have this conflict where you've gone to them and you've downloaded all the reasons why you can't be their friend, you don't have the ability to have that relationship in the future. When you see that person 2 or 3 years from now, when you've worked on your mind and they've worked on their mind. So you would like to do that where you just kind of gradually move away from this individual. You don't have to download all the reasons why you can't be their friend. This is just going to create conflict. And this is also where people will hold on, because they're going to feel that impermanence. They're going to feel you leaving the relationship, and they know that that's what you're doing, and they're going to hold on. This is where some people become stalkers. They might stalk you. They might follow you. They might try to blow up your social media and your messages and like, please don't leave me. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Because their mind is holding on with craving, desire, attachment. So if you just gradually move away to the point that they don't even realize what you're doing, now 6 months, a year down the road, you guys have just gradually moved away from each other. And then when you see each other in the future, hey, how's it going? How you been? What's up? Right? You can have a conversation where you wouldn't be able to do that if you downloaded all the reasons why you can't be their friends. Okay? So this next one is eliminate any craving, desire, wants, or expectations that all beings need to learn and practice these teachings, because you can't force other people to attain enlightenment. Even if you could, it would be very uncomfortable. If I could force people to get to enlightenment, I actually wouldn't even do it. It wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be enjoyable. You need to be able to make your own decisions, and you're going to feel better when you're making your own decisions. When somebody's trying to control you or force you or pressure you into something, you don't like it. And other people don't like it either. So if you're seeing people that are having struggles and difficulties that are non-practitioners, and you know that the answer is for them to practice these teachings, don't feel like you should rush in and try to force them or pressure them to learn these teachings, because they're going to just turn away from it. Because when somebody's trying to pressure you to do something, what's the thing that you do? Usually do just the opposite thing, right? You like dig your heels in the sand. If someone's trying to drag you and pull you, if they grab your arm and try to pull you, you're going to dig your heels into the ground. I'm like, no, I'm not going. I'm not going. And they're just pulling you and pulling you, right? So if we tried to force people to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha, they're just going to dig their heels into the sand, and they're not going to practice the teachings. They're going to do just the opposite. So each person has to decide for themselves to learn and practice these teachings. There's nothing you can do to force somebody to learn and practice. This path to enlightenment is about your training and your development and your growth. And if other people see you becoming more and more peaceful, and they ask you why, you're like, oh, it's the teachings of the Buddha. Really? Where can I get those from? Oh, here's a website, or here's a link to a video, or here's a person you can talk to, right? So wait for people to see how peaceful you are. And they're going to start asking you 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years into your training. They're going to be like, wow, you're always so peaceful now. What is going on in your life? What are you doing differently? That's where now they're interested, and now they will take decisions that are going to move forward. But if you tried to force them and control them to do it, they're not going to do it. So you got to let them do it on their own. So you can't force anyone to attain enlightenment. You're going to need to train your mind to be comfortable with accepting other people's choices and decisions, that their decisions aren't going to match with your wants and expectations. What you decide in life is going to be different than what other people choose in life. This kind of connects over to what we were talking about earlier with true love, that other people are going to have different decisions, and they're going to make different decisions than you. But if you have an expectation that everyone will make the same decisions as you, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful in that situation. So be comfortable with mom and dad having different decisions than you, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong. It's just a different decision. Brothers and sisters, they're going to make different decisions than you, and that's okay. That's their decisions, right? If you want everybody to be the same as you, then you're going to be discontent when people aren't doing things your way. So you're going to need to not crave permanence. The problem isn't that other people aren't practicing the teachings, but instead it's that the mind wants and expects others to practice the teachings. So the problem isn't that mom and dad are harsh and bitter and hostile to you. That's not your problem. The problem that you're experiencing is that your mind's craving for them to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. You're longing, yearning, and wanting them to be polite and respectful. The problem that your parents are experiencing is, they have craving, desire, attachment in their mind. They have anger, and they have this unknowing of true reality. That's their problem. You can't solve that. So in situations where you're wanting other people to interact with you in a certain way and you get angry when they don't interact with you that way, the problem is your own craving, wanting them to be a certain way, where not everybody can be that way because not everybody has had the same wisdom and had the same experiences. So it'd be wonderful if everyone in the world was practicing these teachings. It would be like heaven on earth if everybody was enlightened. But that's just not the place that we're at right now. That there's some people who practice these teachings and there's some people who don't. And here in Chiang Mai, there's a lot of people who practice the teachings. And this is why some people come here and they have such a peaceful experience. They really enjoy being here in Chiang Mai because there's so many people that are practicing the teachings. It feels so lovely to be here. This is why people are attracted here to this city, because it's so peaceful, because people are just minding their own business and doing their own thing, and then they're helping you, they're being generous, they're being polite, they're smiling, they're friendly, they're loving, they're kind. You see all these qualities here. But then when you go home, oh my goodness, people are sometimes bitter and harsh and hostile. So after you're in an environment like this for so long, you might go home and you want other people to practice the teachings, but you're going to have to let that go, because not everyone's going to practice the teachings. So if mom and dad are being bitter and harsh and hostile, okay, that's their problem. But if you don't have a craving for them to be a certain way, you can just maintain your peacefulness and your joy. Understand you can disagree with others' intentions, speech, and actions while choosing to remain peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. This is what we were talking about with true love, that you can disagree with what people choose to do while still being peaceful and joyful. Sometimes we think that disagreement means disrespect, right? Or we think that disagreeing means that we're being impolite or disrespectful. That's not true, right? We've all had different experiences. We're going to disagree with each other sometimes, but that doesn't mean we need to fight to death, right? Sometimes we have a craving in our mind and we want other people to agree with us. We will fight to death in order to get the other person to agree with us, because our mind is longing, yearning, and wanting other people to agree with us. So if you've ever been in a social situation and you've said something and people disagree with you, doesn't mean they're being disrespectful, doesn't mean they don't like you, doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means that they've had different experiences in life than you and they disagree, and that's okay, right? We don't have to fight and argue until we all agree. Right? If people disagree, that's normal. That's impermanence. So you're going to need to get comfortable with people disagreeing with you. You're never going to be in a situation where people agree with you 100% of the time. Even me here at the temple, there's people who show up that disagree with the things that I'm sharing. And sometimes they get very angry. They get very bitter and very hostile. It happens maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times a year. It doesn't really happen very often, but sometimes it happens, right? Even sharing the teachings of the Buddha, there are people that don't think about it. They don't consider it. They don't ask questions in a respectful way. They're bitter and harsh and hostile sometimes, but I don't have an expectation of how the students should or shouldn't function. The vast majority of people are very respectful and very polite, but occasionally people aren't, right? So you're going to have people that disagree with you sometimes, but that doesn't mean you have to be angry just because they disagree. Just understand it's impermanence. Of course, people disagree with you because they've had different experiences than you. So if you don't have a craving for everyone to agree with you, then you can become peaceful and joyful when people are disagreeing with you, right? And then understand that you can disagree with others' intentions, speech, and actions while still maintaining loving kindness and compassion for them, not wanting others to do the same things as you or say the same things as you, right? So other people are going to disagree with you, but it's okay for you to disagree with other people too. Right? You don't have to agree with what other people are saying. Sometimes in a social situation, you might just agree with somebody just because you know if you disagree, they're going to get angry or they're going to get frustrated because they have craving in their mind, right? But don't just agree with people just because you don't want them to get angry, right? Because now you're lying. Now you're not telling the truth. Right? So if you're not interested in disagreeing with them and you think that they're going to get angry and bitter and hostile, then just change the subject. Talk about something else. You don't have to talk about your disagreements. But if you'd like to disagree with people, disagree with them and do it in a peaceful and joyful and respectful and polite way. There's a way to do that. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up to any and all questions. And if you'd like to have a discussion here, we can. Oftentimes what I do is I kind of turn it over to you guys and I say, okay, what are the struggles that you guys are having in life with people that are non-practitioners? What are the difficulties and struggles that you're encountering that you need help with? And if you have any of those, you can ask me those kinds of questions. So I'm just going to open up to all questions that you guys have. And if you'd like to share specific examples that you're challenged with, then I'll give you some advice and help you to understand how to deal with it. So it looks like Chris has something he would like to ask. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm interested in better understanding what it means to feel joy and joyfulness in all different situations, given that I think similar to love, it's often described in different ways and might also be like put in that category of positive feelings and sensations and emotions that have discontentedness associated with it.
Sure. So the joy that I talk about, this is unconditioned happiness or unconditioned gladness. It's gladness and cheerfulness that's not based on any condition. What conditional happiness is based on some condition, the mind will now be happy. Like based on, I bought a new car. I haven't, but I don't have a car, but I bought a new car and now I will be happy. Or I got a raise at work, so now I will be happy. Or I got a new boyfriend or girlfriend, so now I will be happy. This is conditional happiness, and that's temporary. It's going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. So ultimately, you're going to end up back in the painful feelings. But this unconditioned joy or this unconditioned happiness, it's not based on any condition. If you've ever been sitting, like looking at maybe like a mountain landscape or something, and you're just sitting on a bench, and you're like, wow, I could just stay here forever. This is lovely. This is wonderful. I could just stay here forever. But I could leave too, and I'd be completely fine leaving as well. That's unconditional joy. That you're joyful, not because of the beautiful view, but you're just joyful just to be joyful. And I could stay here and be joyful, or I could leave and still be joyful. That your joy isn't based on any condition. And that's what the joy that I'm talking about, or unconditional happiness or unconditional gladness. It's not based on any condition.
Yeah. But how would you describe the feeling or like the valence of unconditional joy versus conditional joy?
Okay. So whenever we talk about feelings, those are conditional. The unconditioned joy that I'm talking about, this isn't a feeling. This is a mental state or a mental quality that the mind is just always experiencing. So whenever we talk about feelings, those are always conditional feelings, because a feeling is going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. And that's always based on some condition. But these mental qualities that are unconditioned, they're just always in the mind. It's always on. They're always permeating in the mind. So it's a mental state or a mental quality versus a conditioned feeling. Yep. Okay. Anything else you guys would like to ask about, or any challenges you're having in your relationships you would like to talk about? You can also talk about these things privately. Yeah, if you can get a mic here. Do you have a mic back there? No? Okay, yeah, we have them up here in the bowl. Sometimes people in the Western world, they like to talk about their personal things privately, which you guys are more than welcome to do. You can talk with me privately, either during a personal guidance session, or we can talk after class or anything, go out to lunch together. But also you can talk publicly too. Thai people, I've seen Thai people stand up at a temple. There's like 1,000 people there, and someone stand up and says, my husband's cheating on me. My kids don't like me. I lost my job and I need your help. What should I do? Right? They'll just like lay it all out. I walked in the other day and my husband was having sex with another woman. What am I supposed to do in this situation? Right? So like Thai people are very open because they know that that's how they're going to get help. But for Western culture, we tend to be a little bit more private. So if you guys would like to talk privately, you're more than welcome to. But if you would like to talk publicly, you can do that too.
So now I'm thinking, like, how do you know that you are in that mental state that you're talking about?
The enlightened mental state?
Yeah.
The way that you'll know is that it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not experiencing any discontent feelings. You haven't been angry. You haven't been frustrated. You haven't been agitated or annoyed. Your mind is focused, concentrated, clear. You have deep memory. You're never tired or exhausted. Your mind gets sleepy, but you're not going to be tired or exhausted. You'll notice you're not even in a bad mood anymore. Your mind's always cheerful. It's bright. It's uplifted. It doesn't matter what's going on. you can maintain your joy and your peacefulness all the time. And you won't have any discontent feelings. And it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that you're experiencing this. But it's not sudden. It's not instantaneous. This is one of the misunderstandings in the world. It's a gradual progression. So you'll have maybe like right now, you have maybe certain parts of your life that you're quite peaceful in. Maybe you have 1 or 2 relationships that you guys never argued ever, right? And you're really quite peaceful in those relationships. But maybe over here, you have some bitterness and hostility in these relationships. And that's because your mind still has craving, desire, attachment. So slowly but surely, as you get rid of all these attachments, you'll see more and more of your life becoming peaceful. You'll see more and more of your mind in longer and longer durations, where as you're making your way through the stages of enlightenment, by the time you get to like, say, the 3rd stage of enlightenment, the mind's actually enlightened when you get to the 4th stage. But let's just talk about the 3rd stage for a moment. In the 3rd stage of enlightenment, you'll be experiencing 2 months, 3 months, even 6 months where your mind's just completely peaceful and joyful. But then you're going to have a little bit of discontentedness. You're going to feel like a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit irritated, but it only lasts for like 30 seconds or a minute, and then you'll be able to eliminate it out of the mind. In the other parts of your life, like maybe in the 2nd or the 1st stage of enlightenment, you're going to be experiencing maybe discontentedness like every 2 weeks or something like that. So you're going to be noticing more and more peacefulness, where if you're completely off the path to enlightenment, you might be getting discontent every day. You might be experiencing boredom or loneliness or annoyance or irritation or frustration. You might be experiencing this every day or every other day. But by the time you're making your way through the jhanas, which are preliminary phases your mind goes through, and then the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment, you're going to notice the mind's brightening up more and more and more and more and more. And there's going to be situations where you were once in that you would get angry and bitter and harsh and hostile, or agitated, and you're not experiencing that anymore. So you'll be able to see your mind gradually experiencing more and more cheerfulness and gladness and joy, like we were talking about. And eventually, it'll be 1 year, and you haven't had any anger. And it'll be 2 years, 3 years, and there's no irritation. You'll know that your mind's enlightened at that point. And you'll have all these other qualities too. You'll have peacefulness and joy. All your relationships will be at ease. You'll be fully fulfilled, fully satisfied. There's no loneliness or boredom or anything like that.
Okay, and do you think like any person can get to that mental state? Like any person?
Any person who's able to learn intellectually can do this, because it's cultivation of wisdom and training your mind. If someone had mental faculties that they weren't able to learn, like maybe they were born with some kind of brain challenge, or maybe they had a brain injury at some point during their life and they're not able to learn, this person is going to need to get into another life and be able to get to enlightenment in their next life. Or they might get to enlightenment at death, because you can get to enlightenment at death too. But if you're able to intellectually learn and understand and train your mind, you're able to get to enlightenment. But you need to have a capacity and a facility to be able to learn.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. But maybe one of the things I'll add is sometimes people think it's only ordained practitioners like monks that can get to enlightenment, but this isn't true. Even household practitioners can get to enlightenment. You'll hear some people that tell you that women can't get to enlightenment. This isn't true. Women can definitely get to enlightenment. Some people will tell you people who prefer same-gender relationships can't get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. Everybody and anybody who's able to learn intellectually, they can get to enlightenment. Mm-hmm.
So a question about timelines here. I've studied in a few different traditions, and the Tibetans, some of the Tibetans, for example, say that it will take you eons of lifetimes if you follow the Lam Rim, their sort of manual to enlightenment to get here. But you're talking about very, very short time periods in comparison, which often seems quite swift to me. It's been a few years, and I'm not the most exemplary learner, so that might have something to do with it. But still, could you elaborate like on the timelines you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's no way a teacher could ever guarantee their student that they're going to be able to get to enlightenment. But all of us have had previous lives in the past, countless lives in the past. So you don't know what you've necessarily been doing in the past lives at this point. Maybe someday you might observe your past lives and you'll know, but it doesn't really matter. But nonetheless, you might have been learning and practicing these teachings in a past life. You don't necessarily know that. But let's just say somebody has never seen these teachings ever, either in this life or in their previous life. And now let's just say that at the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever age it is, they start learning and practicing these teachings. There's no reason why they couldn't start learning and practice and train their mind in this life and actually get to enlightenment. The Buddha took 6 years to get to enlightenment, and that was without teachers or without guides, because he was able to do that, because that's why he was a Buddha. But for you, you're going to have teachers, you're going to have guides, and you're going to be able to learn and practice and be able to get to enlightenment. If you would like to, if you'd like to train your mind, you'd potentially be able to get to enlightenment. The challenge about studying in so many other places is a lot of times people don't understand what enlightenment is. So that might not be something that you've been exposed to before. Sometimes people don't base their teachings on the original words of the Buddha. So this hinders people from being able to actually get to enlightenment. So there's a lot of places out there that are talking about enlightenment or even talking about Buddhism and all these other things. And they might even be discussing what enlightenment is to a certain degree. But if they're not sharing the original words of the Buddha, you're not going to be able to see like immediate, ready progress. So you need to be able to get to the true teachings, which is based on the original words of the Buddha. And the way that you'll know you're studying the original words of the Buddha is that you'll be able to independently verify them. So all the things that I share with you, you're able to independently verify what I'm saying is true. If you're learning things that are based in belief or rituals or, rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, things that are like that, the things that can't be independently verified, then that's not going to lead to enlightenment. So there's probably a good 200 different branches of what people call Buddhism out in the world, but there was only one Buddha. So there can't be 200 Buddhisms, right? It can only be one. And what I teach is the original words of the Buddha, because that's what leads to enlightenment. Even the Buddha himself says, if you don't learn with the true teachings, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. So there's people that dabble in this area for a really long time without ever actually being able to penetrate into the teachings. There was a time about 2 years ago that a person came here. He actually sat right here. And he said, "Hi, I'm so wonderful to be in your class." Da 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 da. He said, "I've been in Buddhism for 30 years," and right away my mind is thinking, "And he's not enlightened yet." That's what I'm thinking as soon as I hear that, because a student who's learning with me, if they're not enlightened by 30 years, then we got to figure out, what's really going on here. Not that someone can't take that long, someone could take that long, but because he came and was interested to study with me and he said he's been in Buddhism for 30 years, my mind went to, how can I help this person? I would like to help this person. So I asked him, I said, what causes anger? Because I was really interested in making sure that I started from the beginning to see where does this person not understand so that I can help them. And I said, what causes anger? And by the way, not only does he say he's been in the Buddhist world for 30 years, but he said he was an ordained monk for 15 years out of that 30. Okay, so 15 years ordained, 30 years in Buddhism total. And I said, what causes anger? Because I was checking to see if he understood the Four Noble Truths so I could help him. And he said, oh, that's a very difficult question to answer. He's like, I don't think I could answer that question. So right away, I'm like, he hasn't even learned the first teaching yet, which is the Four Noble Truths. You learned this on Monday, right? He didn't even know what causes anger, but yet he's been in this area for 30 years and even ordained for 15. So this is the challenge, is that out in the world, all these different people are doing different things. They're not learning with the original words of the Buddha. So you can have someone who's been ordained for 15 years and considering themselves Buddhist for 30, but yet they don't actually know what causes anger yet. So how could they ever eliminate it if they don't know what's causing it? So you might hear different people that tell you it takes eons to get to enlightenment. Okay, well, you've already experienced eons of rebirths in the past. So now you're in this life. So don't allow this life to be complacent in this life. Learn and practice and develop. But be sure you're using the original words of the Buddha, and be sure you have a teacher who can understand you and that you can get that help on a regular, ongoing basis. Then you'll see progress.
I don't want to take up too much time. That was really helpful. But I've heard this before. Everyone says their words are the original words of the Buddha, except the Mahayanas. Like there's over 50 different kinds of techniques of Vipassana, for example. Mm-hmm. Is that partly because Buddha taught in different ways to different people because they had different mental abilities and different personalities and so forth? So could there also be different ways to teach people because of that, and no one way is the true way?
Nope, there's the natural laws. There's the natural laws of existence. They're the same. No matter where you are in the world, these natural laws are the same. And in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you need to awaken to these natural laws. So there's not like he taught one personality one way and another personality another way. All of our minds function exactly the same. What's in our mind is different and unique to each individual person, but the way our mind functions, based in craving, anger, and ignorance, and all these natural laws, it's exactly the same. So what one person needs to learn in order to get to enlightenment is the same thing another person needs to learn. This is why, like the Thai people, they know how to tell if someone's enlightened or not, because they can observe through their conduct, the way that they interact. They can also observe through the wisdom that they're teaching. Based on how they're teaching and what they're saying and how they're describing the teachings, they can know. So people might say what they're teaching is the words of the Buddha, but the words of the Buddha are in the Pali Canon. If they're not teaching from the Pali Canon and they're not able to reference that, and also if they're not practicing the teachings themselves, they're not going to be able to share the teaching. So any teacher who is sharing teachings that are claiming that what they're teaching leads to enlightenment, you should be able to see that that person themselves is either enlightened or very close to it. So you would like to look at things like, is this teacher angry? Is they bitter? Are they harsh? Are they hostile? Are they agitated or annoyed? Do they take their time? Are they patient? Are they friendly? Are they polite? Are they respectful? How do they interact in the classroom? You should look at and observe all these different things. But if someone doesn't know what enlightenment is, they might just go somewhere where someone's dressed in a bunch of robes, they have a bunch of statues everywhere, they have people bowing to them, and now everybody just kind of looks to that person for whatever they say out of admiration and respect, rather than you knowing yourself what is enlightenment and how does an enlightened being function. And now I can look at this person, I can observe them without judging them, without looking down on them, but I can observe them and I can see for myself whether this person is enlightened or not. And now when I learn their teachings, they should be teaching based on the Pali Canon. That's the only documented proof that we have of what the Buddha taught. So anybody who's guiding anyone to enlightenment, it would need to come from the Pali Canon. Any rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship, which is like 99.9% of the Buddhist world that's doing those things, right away, you know that they're not even in the first stage of enlightenment. Because even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind would need to understand that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to enlightenment. So if you go into an environment where they're not using the Pali Canon, that they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, if the teacher is agitated, annoyed, frustrated, irritated, things like this, then you know that this place isn't sharing the teachings that lead to enlightenment. So you would need to look at these kinds of things in others. In Volume 1, Chapter 3, towards the end, I share some things that you can ask a potential teacher to determine whether or not they're enlightened or not. And this is a way for you to know for yourself whether someone's actually enlightened, because in order to guide someone to enlightenment, the teacher would need to either be enlightened or very close to it in order to help people get to enlightenment. They wouldn't be able to guide somebody to enlightenment if they haven't attained it themselves. So I know that this book series is what you need to be able to get to enlightenment. I know that what I'm sharing will guide someone to enlightenment, but you need to be able to see it for yourself. And the only way that you can see it for yourself is to investigate and examine the teachings. And the more that you do through these books and the classes and the things that I share, then more and more as you see the condition of your mind improving in your life, you'll know that what I'm sharing is the truth. What other people are sharing, I don't know 100%, But if they have some of these things that I talk about, like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, or if there's bitterness and hostility and anger, things like this, if they're charging for their courses, this is a good indication that the person isn't enlightened, things like this. So you would like to look at those kinds of things. And if they're not teaching from the original Pali Canon, then you know that this person isn't enlightened, because you can't get to enlightenment without the original words of the Buddha. Mm-hmm. Yep. You guys have questions? Do you guys have microphones?
So I want to ask a more practical question, which is, I find it easier to practice mindfulness or kind of this whole practice in meditation while I'm in Chiang Mai or I'm not working. But once I get back to my busy work schedule, it's very hard to actually consistently practice all of these.
Yeah.
I know a lot of it is my willpower and it's my dedication, but are there any practical tips that you can share to help us consistently practice that?
Yeah. It's not in this discussion. There's a way to integrate the teachings into your life. What you would like to be able to do is on a weekly basis, be trickling the teachings into your life. Doing that through the weekly classes that I teach on Sunday. So even when you go back home, if you can allocate some time each week to maybe attend the live class on Sunday, but if you can't attend it on Sunday live, then you can watch the recording. So if you can kind of trickle the teachings in about an hour and a half each week to learn from a teacher talking, this is one piece. And then be reading this book. That's the other piece. I see you have it in front of you. You're reading it regularly. So read it 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. That should be easily to integrate into your life, even when you're working. Then what you would like to be doing is practicing generosity, where you're giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. Then working on developing your moral conduct, where you're improving your speech, your actions, and your livelihood. And then working on your meditation and developing your meditation. So if you're doing all of these things, you're gradually, slowly but surely bringing up this life practice into your life without putting expectations on yourself or trying to, pressure yourself to do these things, but gradually increase these kinds of things where you're learning about an hour and a half each week. You're reading about 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. You're doing some generosity in your daily life. You're practicing moral conduct in your daily life. And then you're meditating. And then by you reading and by you learning in the classes, that's going to inform your practice more and more. And you'll be able to improve your practice more and more. So the Buddha teaches this too. This is what the Buddha teaches. It's called the way of practice, where you practice generosity, moral conduct, and your meditation. Those are the three things that he suggests you focus on every single day and doing those things, because it's kind of like your moral conduct. If you allowed your moral conduct to continue to be unwise, it's kind of like the pipe has busted and you're spewing all this water all over the place, right? And you'd like to shut down the broken pipe, because as long as it's spewing water all over the place, you got to clean up this mess, right? So the first thing you're interested in doing is closing off the pipe. So that's what you're doing by working on your moral conduct. And then the generosity and the meditation is training your mind to be able to do the moral conduct better and better. So that's why those three things were real priorities in the path to enlightenment. And then the Eightfold Path is what's helping you to understand how to improve your moral conduct and how to do your meditations and all these other things. Mm-hmm. You have a question, ma'am?
So you mentioned earlier that there might be some practitioners around us and they will have expectations on us. Let's say when we're in a relationship and the other person is not so much a practitioner, and the expectations that they give it to us, that I don't like it so much, but I still want to maintain the relationship. So I wonder, how can I balance that to the point that I don't feel so exhausted, but at the same time to make it work, if that makes sense.
Sure. So in order to really get to peace and joy in any of your relationships, especially like a life partner, I imagine that's what you're talking about, right? Yeah. So in a life partner relationship, in order for this relationship to get to complete peace and joy, where you guys aren't arguing, you're not upset with each other and all these kinds of things, you guys would both end up needing to practice the teachings. As long as one person's practicing and the other person's not, you're not going to be able to get to complete peace and joy. It's just not going to happen, because you're going to be understanding things like true love and they're not. Right? So like, say you go on a business trip and you're traveling and they call you up on the phone. They say, "Hey, honey, did you miss me?" And you're like, "No." Because you're not attached, right? And they're like, "Hold on, what a second, you didn't miss me? Don't you love me?" And it's like, "No, I love you. I just don't miss you," right? I'm completely content and joyful when I'm with you, but I'm also very joyful when I'm away from you too. And they're like, "No, you don't love me because you don't miss me," right? So this is like their mind just not understanding what craving, desire, attachment is. So there'll be this constant struggle within the relationship, not just over this kind of silly topic, but other things too. So ultimately, to get to peace and joy, both people would need to be practicing the teachings. But sometimes someone takes a while to kind of warm up to the teaching. So like my wife, we've been together for 17 years. She's Thai, so she's Buddhist from birth. So at the 11-year mark is where I really started practicing the teachings closely. And she came to me and she said, "I think this relationship's going to actually work." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you're starting to practice the teachings," right? And we had already been married. We have kid, we have house together. We have everything. She's like, "I think this relationship might work now," right? So you're going to need to have a partner that's practicing the teachings to fully get to a point where you're peace and joyful. But there are skillful things that you can do that are help this person along the way. Because for those 11 years, I was kind of dabbling in the teachings, but I wasn't really practicing them closely. So the things that you can do, like say your partner's putting expectations on you and you know that that's what it is, and they don't know that, but you can see it very clearly. And the last thing you're interested in doing is trying to meet someone else's expectations, because as soon as you meet their expectations, they're just going to change them. And then you have to meet those and you're going to be exhausted, right? So when someone's trying to put their expectations on you, like my mom and my family used to do this to me, and I would say, "I'm never going to meet your expectations." They're like, "Huh?" I was like, "Yeah, that's not my goal in life. My goal isn't to meet your expectations." And they're like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because that's just going to lead to frustration. And you're not going to get happy if I'm meeting your expectations. You're only going to get happy temporarily. So my goal is not to meet your expectations." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh." So that doesn't mean they're going to stop putting their expectations on you. They're still going to put your expectations on you, right? So now the second time they come around and they're like, trying to put their expectations on me. I'm like, "Yeah, that's your expectations. Don't worry, I'm not going to be doing that." They're like, "Why not?" "You should do what I want you to do." "Nope, sorry, that's not what life's about." So you can kind of be funny and joking and things like this. Or you can also do it this way. You can do it where you're speaking from your own perspective. So like say your partner's trying to put their expectations on you and you're just sitting there listening and you're just like, "That's expectations, that's expectations." And now when they're done, you can say, "I understand where you're coming from and I understand what you're saying. I'm not interested in putting my expectations on you, because I know that you are your own being and you need to make your own decisions, and you're going to feel most comfortable by making your own decisions. So if we can get to a point in our relationship where you're not putting your expectations on me and I'm not putting my expectations on you, we'll actually create quite a bit of peacefulness in our relationship." So you can have these kinds of discussions with them, but you need to be able to understand that when you have that discussion, it's not like they're going to walk away and instantly be able to do it perfectly. You're going to need to remind them of these things multiple times before they actually do it. Because if you have this kind of conversation with them, then say like a week later, they start putting your expectations on you, calmly, you can say, "Honey, this is exactly what we were talking about the other day. This is your expectations. And I know you really want me to do this, but that's not going to be what makes you happy," right? So you're going to have to remind them occasionally of these kinds of things. So you can talk and you can have conversations like this, but only if they're open to it. If they're not open to learning and growing and developing, you guys aren't going to be able to get to peace and joy because their mind's just going to keep putting expectations on you. You're not meeting their expectations and they're just going to get angry. And if you try to meet their expectations, you're just going to get exhausted because their expectations are going to keep changing. So you either going to need to let go of the relationship and move on, or you're going to need to have some really good heart-to-heart conversations with them, help them see what they're doing. And then if they're interested in improving, then they can improve. And that's where this book comes in. You can give it to them as a gift, wrap it up in gift wrapping and give them first book as a gift, or send them a little YouTube video or something like this. You can drop these little hints, but if they're not interested in pursuing it, then they're not going to pursue it. So that's why you might try 1, 2, or 3 times. But then if they don't pursue it, then you're going to have to just let it go. And you might have to let go of the whole relationship because you'll never get to peacefulness as long as 2 people are putting expectations on each other. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. So what I'm going to do is just end our class here. It's about 12:30. So we'll go to lunch, and then when we come back, we're going to do meditation, and I'm going to teach you this next topic. Let me get my little cursor here. The next topic is practicing non-attachment, how to eliminate attachment to those who are closest to us. Because as we were talking earlier, this is what sabotages your relationships. When you have attachment to the people that are really close to you, like mom and dad and brothers and sisters, you guys will get discontent with each other, or life partners. You're going to get angry and frustrated and irritated at each other. So what you've got to do is you've got to eliminate your attachment to them. So that's what I'm going to teach you, because this is some of the hardest attachments to eliminate. So you need to learn how to love without attachment, which is what I was talking about this morning. But then there's specific tools and techniques of things you can actually do within your own mind to train your mind to let go. And that's what I'm going to teach you, is the tools and techniques of how to let go of these attachments, so you can maintain the relationship with love, but without the attachment. And that's where the peace and joy will come in. So if you guys will be okay to take an hour and 15-minute lunch break, would you guys be okay with that? Normally we take an hour and a half. So that will get us back at 1:45. You guys good with that? Okay. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you at 1:45, okay? Thank you guys so much for your questions and your interest to learn.